stage. And you should get a recording button there. And he figured out his vocal problems from the body. His greatest discovery, and remember, this is in like the 1880s. His greatest discovery is he realized that anything we do involves the entire body, not a portion. So everybody with voice, they think it's the mouth, they think it's the throat, they think it's this upper, but it's really not. The whole body is actually involved, and that's what he discovered. He was doing things within his body that were producing ill effects for his vocal. So what he did is he analyzed himself, okay? And then he created his principles, and those principles then he used to help other people. He started out with vocal, but it went into physical, it went into emotional, it went into all kinds of different things, because he thought, wow, the body basically works the same way. And that's what we're really going to discuss. All right. Now, first of all, everything I'm going to tell you is not new. Okay. Everybody knows a lot about their body. All right. What I will do is I will put a different slant on how things go with the body, how the body works more efficiently or how the body works less efficiently. And always remember, in any moment of time, things are either going well or they're not going well. As we all have kind of proven, things go awry. And when they go awry, we are really talking about some sort of block through the body. And remember, the blocks can be mental, emotional, psychological, physical. I mean, they can be on many different levels. They can be several things, or they can just be one thing, okay? So it's, there's no rule. There's no rule. And that's also a big Alexander aspect. There is really no good, nor is there truly any bad when it comes to us in relationship to our world and our body. It's only what we deem as good or bad that becomes good or bad. But in the outer world itself, there's really nothing that's created as bad. So for example, a lightning strike, people would think that's a bad thing. But the reality is, no, that's a good thing for the planet. But if you get struck by the lightning, that's a bad thing for you. So we always have to keep in mind that that's really what's going on all the time. And remember, our body, mind, spirit system picks up on everything. It picks up on everything. Even when we're asleep, it picks up on everything, whether we actually know it or not, okay? And that's another thing that's not honored, because we think, oh, if I'm having an argument and the baby is asleep in the back of the car and I'm having an argument with my spouse, the baby is not picking up on this. The baby is picking up on the energy just as clearly as if they were conscious and awake. It's just that it has now gone into their subconscious. And that goes with all of us. Everything goes into the subliminal, which is why we start to go, you know, why do I do that? Why do I do that when this happens or when that happens? Because remember, it was programmed subliminally. All right. Now, everything we are, everything we know, and everything we do has been put in. Okay. When we learn something new that we don't know, well, then there's no program for it. There's no habit around it. It doesn't really exist for the body. So if you really don't know something, that means you have no experience with it. But once you learn something, you start to, as you get more and more familiar with it, you get better and better, and you develop habits as you go along with that thing. Now, the habits, again, will either be really good ones or not really good ones, okay? So if you have a quote unquote teacher that is not being very clear or explicit, you may develop bad ones. This happens like with languages, when people learn languages. Sometimes the teacher doesn't have a clear understanding of, let's say, the pronunciation. And so the student then is doing their perfect pronunciations the way they were taught, but unfortunately, it is not, they're not very good. They're not very strong, all right? And the other thing is, no one is to blame, really, because remember, everybody's doing the best that they possibly can do in the moment, according to the information they currently have. So do remember, our world does another big thing where we love to blame. We love to blame, I wasn't, whatever, told this, I didn't, wasn't made this clear. But again, it may not have been the fault of the other person. They may have been misprogrammed by someone or whatever. Remember, it happens all the time, especially when we get to, you know, the world news cycles. I mean, there's atrocities that go on all the time because somebody doesn't really understand what's actually going on. So we just want to cut everybody a break. There are no, there's nothing you can not get yourself out of. Everything has been, can be reprogrammed. Everything that is can be changed, and it can be reworked. And that's why I use myself as the example, because I should be dead today. I think it's tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow I'll be dead. I should be dead for 8 months. 8 months from this second cancer. And I should be dead coming up on 8 years from the first cancer. All right. And, you know, we think of those as being uncontrollable or not programmable, and they are. And we will talk about that as we go on. All right. So nothing can terrify us unless we allow ourselves to be terrified. Terror is really created internally. It doesn't actually exist externally. All right. But we can think, if somebody comes up to me and points a gun at my head, that I will be afraid. Will I be afraid? That's up to me. And remember, people have saved themselves in those situations because they were fearless and they were able to transcend the energy of the person trying to make them afraid. That's a common story, okay? So it's all an energy game. That's all it is. And we want to get really good at the energy game and how the energy game works. And so to do that, I'm going to begin with sharing my screen of this picture, which is, where is it? Participants can see. Oh, here it is. It's down here. Perfect. Okay. So the skeletal structure and a system and the structure. Now, again, everything I'm going to tell you, you know, but I'm just going to talk about it in slightly different terminology. All right. And we have on the left side the side view of the skeleton. The middle is the front view, and the far right diagram is the back view. Okay. So front, side, and back. Now, we all know the brain is housed in the head. That is no news to anybody. We also know that the brain has a tail which drops down the spine. However, in science, they call it the spinal cord. I don't like the term because it literally is the brain. It is attached to the brain, which is why everything happens fast. okay? The brain cord is very well protected by the spine. It's very well housed in there. From the brain cord, things branch off, and they call those branches the nervous system. I really don't like that term because we all know the connotation of nervous, and that there is something that is unnerving me or nervy or filled with nervousness, all right? Nerves are really tiny, tiny branches of brain. That's what they are. And what a lot of people don't realize is you have brain flowing through this hand and this hand, and they each have abilities that are different, and they each have a consciousness that is different, okay? Brain means there's consciousness and learning, but not all things will learn equally within the body, all right? That's why we need to be in charge to see if we can balance things out in the system. From the brain, let's call brain system, certain things are larger, right? Like when we get down toward the legs, there's a branch off from the spine, from that brain cord, and we have a branch off that they call in science sciatic nerves. They're really brain sciatic, right? Yeah, brain sciatic, I'll call it. And you've got one that goes off to the left and then to the right. Now, once again, your left leg knows things that your right leg does not. It is filled with a history and memories. It remembers when you fell on that leg when you were 3 years old and how bad it hurt. It doesn't mean you, in your conscious mind, remember it. It means that that part of you in the body still has memory of it, okay? And a lot of you know this, but again, we really want to get the idea that it's a brain system functioning through the body. And the way we can prove it is because when someone does have an amputation, that limb for the amputee is still present. Doesn't go away. It can have emotional things happen. It can have physical things happen. There's real things that go on, even though it does not exist anymore in the actual body. Okay, that's how powerful the brain system really is. It forgets nothing. It doesn't get rid of anything. Okay, and that is then how this system internally works. Everything comes off of thinking and thought. Okay, so if someone has a stroke and they can no longer wave their hand, remember that's only happening because of the stroke that blocked or obliterated those messages in the system, okay? But it's not just strokes. Anything can get rid of messaging. For the most famous, amnesia, you get hit or something happens to you and you have obliterated the system. The system is in some sort of shock or blockage and can no longer function the way it once did. The person doesn't even know who they are, which is what happened to me with the brain cancer. I no longer knew where I was going, who I was, why I was going there, and I didn't know where to go. I knew nothing. And I will tell you, it was a fabulous feeling because you kind of release self. It's a very, was for me, a very calm feeling, right? But here's the deal. Somewhere in the system, it kept telling me I knew I had to be somebody going somewhere. I knew that deep down in the system. I just didn't know who, and I didn't know where. That's all. But I knew that was theirs, which I believe really continued to keep me very calm. All right. Now, The brain system activates the muscular and ligament and tendon systems, all through thought, okay? So remember, those of you that have had children or have known it, you have to spend a lot of time taking their hand and going, say bye-bye, say bye-bye, until they actually get the program. The program then comes in, and then once the program is in, it's like, how did I not know that? Of course, it's as simple as can be. So think of it in terms of programming, think of it in terms of your computer, and what you put in is what you will get out. If you do it in a particular manner or way, that's the way it will exist in the system, okay? That then formulates personalities, types, and characteristics of people. Someone who is nervous. Remember, they didn't start that way, okay? They slowly acquired nervous habits, nervous tics. Someone who is fearful. Remember, they didn't start that way. That was acquired. Someone who often has whatever, digestive problems, issues, anxiety over certain things, breathing disorders. It doesn't really matter what it is. I could go on and on forever, but it's been programmed, and whether the person was conscious of the program or unconscious of the program is left to their history. Do you remember babies are being programmed in the womb by the mother, and certain things will come in to the child. They will either be accepted or rejected. We just never know which way it's going to work, okay? And that's why you see such splits in siblings. One can be completely opposite of the other. Depends on where the mother was at, if it's the first child, the second child, the third child. Remember, all of these things play in to what happens. Was it an easy pregnancy? Was it not? Were there problems? It's all working into the system. But even those can be overcome. Even those can be reworked if the person has the wherewithal to be able to do this. All right? Now, before I go on to the next section, does anybody have anything they would like to ask about or say, or, you know, anything that you would like to comment on before I continue? Everybody's good? All right. All right. So clear so far. And now,
Could
yeah.
I just clarify, when you talk about the system, do you mean that brain system you talked about going throughout the body?
Absolutely. The brain system leads the show. Remember, brain dead means no function in the brain system. It has to be functioned by outer things like machines or whatever. I don't really believe in true brain dead, because I believe there's still something lurking in there, but there are people that do believe in the term brain dead, okay? Don't really like it, because it doesn't really die until the person dies. And even then, you know, it transforms. It transforms as far as I'm concerned. All right, great. Anybody else before we continue? Because now we go to the actual essence of the Alexander. Now, Alexander realized that the most important point was where the head connects to the spine, which really, when you think about it, makes total sense, because the brain literally has to drop down into this thinner, narrow canal. Remember, the brain cord is not that huge. It's not like a big sausage. It's like a little sausage that it goes down, and it goes down in a series of curves. This curves in, this curves out by the shoulders, This curves back in, and then the tailbone curves back out. The reason, curves are always stronger than things that run straight. So for example, an arched window, which is a curve, is a very strong, that's why cathedrals did them for hundreds of years that way, because they're very strong. When you start to go square, they become a little bit weaker. So the spine is actually extremely strong with the curves, okay? But the head rests at the top of the spine. Now, most people think of the head as being attached. It is by muscles, skin, there's all kinds of ligaments, tendons, all kinds of things that attach it. However, the bones are not attached. That's why you can do these things with your head. There's no true bony attachment, okay? The head is separate in that regard. And think of this joint where it meets is like a teacup on a saucer. It has a little groove, and so it kind of stabilizes in there so it doesn't come off the groove, it doesn't dislocate, right? But it is not that there's no bone that connects to the bone in your spine. There's no such thing, okay? So this remains very flexible. And that joint point is what Alexander referred to as primary control. All control comes from this point. And the reason is because when we have a reflex like the fight or flight reflex, it all initiates at that top place. It literally puts the brakes on at the top joint. Once you've put the brakes on at the top joint, everything shuts down below that top joint, okay? So it is a very powerful joint. If it is even mildly a sore neck, a stiff neck, remember it can hamper the flow from the brain at the top to the brain at the bottom, okay? Anything will hamper it. Fear, by the way, strikes in the same place. When I am afraid, this is the joint that freezes. This freezes and puts a stop to the rest of the body, which is why we come up with the expression, we felt like a deer in the headlights, because we can't move, we can't speak, we can't react, we can do nothing. We just are there, okay? So primary control. Now, he realized that this is a very complicated joint. Remember, it's the only thing they can't amputate is your head. They can amputate just or take anything else out, but your head, you're not going to do very well with, right? So this joint has muscles that people don't really think about. First of all, it's thick. Remember when you touch the back, it feels very small back there, but it keeps going. And half of your neck is the spine, the front of the spine. Your throat takes up the other half of your neck. But when you get past the throat, that's the front of the spine. So when you swallow into that back wall, that is actually you're swallowing into the spine, okay? And that's where Alexander realized people don't attend to the front of it. Some people don't even realize that's their spine. So they get very tight or constricted or pinched up there. The head now, and this is the first direction, always floats away from the top of the spine. Always. So as you're sitting there right now, just think the thought that all the muscles around the top of the spine here are letting go. And as they let go, You literally allow in thought the head to float away from the top, away from the very top of the spine. And just breathe, think that thought, because remember, you're connecting to those muscles. And remember that as the spine continues, those muscles should be releasing. The muscles that you feel behind your throat, behind all of this area of the quote unquote neck, are all letting go. There is never a reason to hold the head onto the spine. And everybody just think that a little bit more. And by the way, if you think in other words, that's fine. You can think in another language, that's fine. You can think in any terms that get the idea that the head floats and is not attached to the spine. Great. And now I just want to ask, as you did that, did you notice anything in your body when you did that, or did you not? And remember, there's no right answer. Did you sense something or did you not? And some people are nodding their heads. Would anybody like to speak about what they sensed or not? Okay, and go ahead, Loretta.
So I have had a pain in my the base of my spine on the right, in my SI joint, which normally doesn't really bother me when I'm sitting, as I'm sitting supported on the floor.
Okay.
But the more I had that sensation of my head, so I don't feel like I have any tension up here. So the more I had that sensation of my head floating off, this all relaxed, and suddenly I could really feel that pain.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That's a reaction to it. Now, just because we're talking about the top doesn't mean we'll have the reaction there. There can be a reaction. We might feel more pain, less pain. We might feel tingling. We don't know what we're going to feel because we cannot untie the knot that we have created. We have to allow it to be untied by the thinking in this system. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's wonderful. Would anybody else like to share anything, or are we good? Yes, Antoinette.
Barry, I felt an energetic reaction, astoundingly.
There you go.
You know, I had throat cancer and I've had a huge up in my throat. Just quite interesting. But I felt like my ears were like buzzing, and that's energy vibration for me. So it was quite an energetic response I got, and a very freeing. It's amazing. Just thinking it made my head feel so much freer. Incredible. It like loosened up, just loosened me up. More thing.
Excellent. Excellent. And once again, we can't judge where it's going to go. We have no idea. The problem is sometimes people, when they have a sensation that's odd, they start to get fearful or freak out. Remember, it's your own system that's reacting in a particular way. There's never anything to be afraid because the system is far wiser than we actually are about it. Remember, it remembers our birth. It's got things down that we know nothing about in our conscious mind. We have to learn them. So that is excellent. And never expect something to happen and never expect nothing to happen, because you never know what you're going to get. You never know what you're going to get. All right? Everybody else good? Anybody else want to add to any of that? Or are we good to go? Jane.
Hi. Well, you know, I felt a wonderful light floating sensation. Interesting. The minute you just said it remembers your birth, I felt myself clutch up like this.
Yes.
There was a trauma during my birth, I think. So I'm, you know, that was weird. But anyway, I felt this wonderful floating thing. So
beautiful. And
until we
remember
mentioned that birth thing.
The body reveals what it needs to reveal when it needs to reveal it. Often we push for reveals. We push to like figure it out, you know? And God knows, you know, with the cancer, I would be like, and then I learned you just have to let it go. You have to give it up. The body goes at its own pace, and it's much wiser than we are. There's no sense in struggling with it. Struggle will only create more problems in conflict and tension. And what I love, and thank you again, Jane, when you mention a word like birth, we respond on levels we don't even know we're responding sometimes.
Right.
Okay. But because you were thinking about that, you all of a sudden discovered, oh, wow, look at that. And every word, every energy, everything, we are energetic beings, and it's constantly transferring, constantly. And even if there's nobody around, it's transferring through objects and energy in your space. So we have to honor that and kind of go, wow, this is amazing. The body is always revealing if we allow it. And if it's not, there's a reason it's not. And then we have to allow that. It doesn't want to go there. Because remember, it may not want to traumatize itself. Simple. Okay? Spectacular, everybody. That's already a great success. And we just started. Now, let me go back to this share. When we go down the spine, okay, people think of the spine as being straight. And, you know, they'll say, sit up straight, straight spine. That's nonsense, right? Because where do you see straight in this curving spine? You don't see straight, right? Even the terminology to a child, stand up straight, that's very abusive, really, because they stiffen because they know what a straight line is. You know, a 5-year-old knows what a straight line is. But if you tell them that directive in the wording, stand up straight, sit up straight, they will do the image that they know in their minds, which is completely wrong from what the spine actually is. And if you will also notice, as we go down the spine, it has this gets larger. Everything gets larger till you get to the base of the spine. This is much smaller at the top than this at the bottom. All right. It is wrapped in muscle, and then the biggest muscles are the spinous erectus, which, remember, spinous erectus takes the spine up. That's what that's all about. They're the only muscles in the body that go up in relationship to gravity and electromagnetic energy. They're the only ones, okay? Remember, the arms in your muscle, when you let go, they go down. Everything else goes down, but not the spinous erectus. It goes up. You do not have to work them. You work them by leaving them alone and letting gravity and electromagnetic energy work them. You do not work the spine, okay? So they did a thing with women who carried on their heads in South Africa, and it was a huge study that they had done, and they found that their spines in their 80s were perfect. No degeneration, no problems. And the reason is because in order to carry those, 90, 100 pounds on your head, you have to really let go of your spine. You have to really balance from the top of the head. And they found that their male counterparts, all the same age, who did not carry, had osteoporosis and arthritis and blah, 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 blah. All of the, things we've learned about in Western. So the spine is plenty strong if it's left alone. And in Alexander terms, we call that freeing the spine, not trying to make it into something, not sitting up straight, not standing up straight, not posturing. We leave it alone and we see what it wants to do. Remember, some of you have bigger, I'll say more curvy curves. Some of you have longer spines that aren't as curvy. Everybody's got a unique spine, and not all spines are able to do the same things because of background programming, et cetera, et cetera. So the healthiest spine is left alone. From there, we go to the ribs. Now, the ribs attached to the spine, 2 ribs, 2 attachments per rib. So 12 ribs on one side, 12 ribs on the other, so 24 attachments. Your rib cage, as you can see in these pictures, hangs and slumps downward, okay? It does not pull upwards. When we puff up the ribs or the chests, we are actually blocking the function of the spine in relationship to breathing. Okay, now breathing, we're going to work a little bit more on separately, but do remember that breath is what's keeping the body alive. If you are not breathing, or if you have no breath, you will catch your death, because as soon as there's not enough oxygen, the body does go into a slight dying procedure. It starts cutting off systems because it's like, uh-oh, we better conserve. Uh-oh, we better conserve. And then if it continues, the body slowly starts going into a dying phase, all right? Once you cut off the oxygen. That's true of everything, plants, I mean, everything, animals, it's all works the same way. Ribs must be left alone as well. And remember that the rib cage is protective of the organs at the top, which are basically the heart and the bronchioles that go here, and the lungs, of course. So they do their job when they're left alone, all right? Now we go to the shoulders. The shoulders are 2-part, the blade in back and a clavicle in front. The shoulders only have this attachment to the bones of the skeleton, to the rib cage. That is why shoulders are the most fragile and the easiest to dislocate. Okay, very easy to dislocate a shoulder, just fall off a bike, but very hard to dislocate your hip. That you got to work on. That's not as easy. Okay. The shoulder blade always relaxes down these lovely ribs, but if the ribs are tight, the shoulder is tight. If the ribs are held, the shoulder is held, because the shoulder is resting. These two rest outwards. That's how we get our width, right? And the 2 in back rest outward and downwards. And that's how you're able to lift your arm. The blade actually relaxes in a downward direction, all right? And then, of course, the arms are on the outside of the body, and they hang. They hang from the shoulder blades all the way down toward the floor, all right? And that was, Alexander would call that the width of the system, okay, the width. And then we get to the pelvis, which also has a width to the system, but the pelvis, when we're born, is not attached to the spine, which is why a baby cannot sit up right away. It takes them months to develop the growth of the pelvis to the lower spine. And then at about 5 months, 6-ish, 7, they start to sit up. The pelvis has a lot of room because it wasn't attached. It has a lot of wiggle room, which is why the hips can be very flexible and people do all those Hawaiian dances and stuff, because you can really wiggle them around. Okay. Some people are less flexible, but that's because they grip too much in the lower back. The lower back never needs to be gripped for anything. And the pelvis releases away from the lower back, away from the center of the spine. Okay. But pelvis is attached to spine. And as your head and spine move upwards, so does the pelvis. But the leg joints in the front move out and downwards. They do not go with the pelvis. And the hip joint, by the way, this is the hip joint, right where the leg bone comes off the pelvis, is a problematic joint because people feel that their pelvis is part of their leg and their pelvis has nothing to do with their leg. Okay? And that I blame on clothing, because we think we have this thing called a mythical waist, right? And that we have a waist that separates one part from the other, and that is wrong. And do you remember people didn't have waists until we get to like the 1400s, the late 1300s, 1400s. It was all robe, right? Because there was no, there is no division, right? So when we bend at the hip joint, okay? And then we have these two legs. Once again, look at these leg bones. They go at an angle. Once again, people call a straight leg. It's not straight. It's slightly curved. And the straightest bones really, and these are even curved a little, but are these bottom bones that then go to the feet. All right. And wherever there is a joint, remember there are lots of attachments, which is why joints bend. But you need a lot of attachments to do that. Sometimes people stiffen one part of the joint and free the opposite part. So they can be overly loose in one way and then very tight in another. Okay. Again, it takes a balance in the system. That's all done, by the way, once again, through the brain system, the thinking. The thinking. Over flexibility can be just as dangerous as inflexibility. So what we have to remember, the body is always looking for balance on both sides. It never wants one thing to outdo the opposite thing. Okay? Because that's instability. That's instability. And again, that's according to Alexander. All right. That's as far as I want to go with this, because I want to get to the exercise. Does anybody have any questions now about any of that information? Or would you like to say anything? Go ahead, Antoinette.
So I was born with scoliosis. So my mother put me in a brace when I was very young, and I've still got a curved spine. So are you saying if that's how your spine is, that's how it should be left? We shouldn't be straightened up, because if we're out of alignment, don't we have all kinds of problems with other joints? And
yes, we can, but here's the deal. The spine will let go of what it can let go of as we progress, as you do this work. So if I have somebody with a severe scoliosis, like I'm talking really severe, I never even really address it as problematic. Obviously, we can all see it. And then we do the work and we see what that spine will do in relationship to it. Some things I've had are miraculous. I mean, they get amazing results. Children in particular, the younger they are, the more it's like, oh my God, it's almost miraculous. But as the person ages, it can be more difficult. So it's never about forcing, but it is about the thinking and reprogramming that part so that the spine can make a decision what it wants to do. Does it want to curve more? Does it not? Does it want to go more center? And so you will see with Alexander, we have to go with the person. We don't know exactly what the background is about that. And also where they are with it, all right? So it's a great question, but even with an injury, I know what it should be doing, but I will never make it do that. I will see what it will allow me to do, but I will never push. Because remember, pushing, most of us are very good at pushing and very good at forcing, but we're not very good at allowing. And we don't use the idea of using the thinking thought system, brain system, to work it out. We feel like, no, I know how to make it happen. And that's where we get into trouble. And that's where most, injuries occur, because people think, oh, no, I know how to do this. And remember, your body is ever changing. You do not have the same body you had an hour ago. Your body has different information, and it's making different adjustments, whether you are aware of it or not. It's irrelevant. It's really irrelevant. Go ahead. Yes, Loretta.
So Gary, if you've got so if you have some sort of therapy, I'm not talking about Alexander, I'm talking about like a physical kind of therapy, like you have a chiropractic adjustment, or you get driven by a physiotherapist, or whatever the case may be. I mean, so what you're saying is, that's what I'm getting, is that's why sometimes the treatment can be extremely effective if the spine is happy to allow that.
Yes.
If you've got the allowing going with the therapy, then you can go to the chiropractor and go, oh my God, it was a miracle. The chiropractor gave me 2 adjustments and my life is different. But that's because the spine at that point, or the body, was prepared to actually do that release. And other times you can go to the chiropractor 27 times. You go, well, I don't understand why this is not working. And it's because the body's just not ready for that.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. And that's the reason it can work beautifully for one person and horribly for another person. Some people are injured. They're injured. You see, so it's about where is that mind-body system at that moment. And remember, it's always at the moment. Because just because it didn't work, like let's say 2 years ago, it doesn't mean it won't work again. You see, but people right away develop a whole program. Yeah. And then they believe it, you see, and they don't realize what was really going on there. Okay. Go ahead.
So I've always thought, so sometimes, people will come and they'll say, oh my God, I've been to 27 doctors and whatever, right? And then I don't know, they get to the one person and then they go, that person is the miracle worker. And so my thinking has always been, every other person got you to the place where that last person and your body was ready for whichever person actually got to do the miracle, right? So none of that other stuff before was necessarily not working, just wasn't working the way you thought it needed to be working. And so if you're the lucky practitioner who gets them at that place where they are now ready, then you look like the miracle worker, right?
You look like the miracle worker.
You're just actually damn lucky because you got them at the right place.
That's right. It's like in a casino, the person who keeps doing it, feeding it. And then the next guy comes up, puts in $1 and they win 6 million. You know what I mean? That's really what we're dealing with. It's really what we're dealing with. And people get frustrated because they're like, I want it and I want it now. And that's the resistance. That's where you can guarantee it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because there's too much force, too much rigidity. The body hates rigidity. Just like, if somebody tied you up, that is not what the body likes. That is not what we like. We like to be free. We like to be free. And so therein lies the whole, working with. And only you, the individual, know how far you can allow or go. So I often tell people, if they are afraid of going to the chiropractor, don't do it. If you're afraid, stay away. You're getting a signal, this is not your time. But if you really feel like you want to go, go. You see, so it's really very simple because the body gives you all the clues. But a lot of times people fight with their the insistence of the mind. Remember, the mind can get us in big trouble because we have made up our mind on a particular way that something should occur. And that's where we can get into big trouble. The mind can always be very dangerous, very connected to the ego. Very connected to the ego. All right. Anything else before we continue? Jane.
I'm interested in this thing you're saying about hyperflexibility, or big flexibility can be as much of a detriment as stiffness or something. I mean, I was always very, very flexible, did a lot of splits. As a matter of fact, I was in a play in my 20s. The New York Times ad was me doing a full split, sitting. I studied with Anna Sokolow in those days, and she used to say, you're too limber. And I used to think that was, yeah. And the thing
Anna was big on that. Yes.
Anna, so and she was great and also mean, but I mean, I never could understand. But the thing was that for years, this was something that I enjoyed, I guess. But I have now had 2 hip replacements.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I swim now, and it's great. I love swimming. But I have learned that so much of the exercise I did for so many years, and I was a daily exerciser, I still am, but not that kind. I'm wondering, yeah. So I'm trying to listen. I used to get up in the morning and do a split. For years, even when I first knew you, I did that.
And we think we're doing something really good.
Thinking I was.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, it kind of wore that joint out or something. I don't know. I did have a couple of falls. But anyway, I don't know. I'm just thinking about this. I wish I had known how to work with it so that I could have understood what Anna was saying, because it was certainly appreciated in this play where I was playing a cheerleader. So I was, had these long legs sticking out. I don't know, but I think I was pushing it.
Yeah.
I was pushing it all the time.
And remember, it's about finding the balance.
Yeah.
And do you remember some people, and that includes vocal, anything that people are very good at and gifted with, they want to kind of overdo it.
Yeah.
They want to kind of make like, wow, yeah, I can do this. It feels so great. Da, da, da. But that doesn't mean that's going to continue all the time. And it could be weakening. And once again, it's all about balance. And by the way, waking up, that's another thing. Some people wake up in ways that are not helpful to the body because they push it too hard. Some people wake up in ways that are better for the body because they take it at its pace. Remember, every night's sleep is different. You can be more rested on one night than you are on the next night. And that means the way you get up, you can't do the same thing you did on the good night, on the bad night. You have to really honor where it is. And that's really what the Alexander is about, honoring where it is in this particular moment. And remember, it is not the same. It is shifting all the time.
So it's really about being present.
Yes.
And not, having these routines and things. And, I do this every morning or that really knowing that's, yeah.
Yeah. And that's really the key and the secret. And remember, we are aging, we are changing, and we have to go with those changes. If we don't go with those changes, we're going to be in big trouble. And that's how people injure themselves, because they're in their 40s and they're trying to pick it up like they were in their 20s. And that is not going to work. That is not going to work for anybody. Doesn't matter who it is.
Right.
So that's why, we rethink the program. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go and use those. We said we were going to lay. Remember, if you can't lay, you can sit. All right. And what we're going to do, and I've got my 3D here, we're going to lay with the spine relaxing and the legs bent at the base so that your feet are on the floor, right? So the foot is on the floor, her leg fell over. And so, yeah, you can take your cameras off and adjust yourselves And then I will do all the rest because we're going to go through all we just did and we're going to use our thinking now. We're going to use our thinking.
And sorry,
Ye-
and Gary, nothing under our heads, right? So just
And something
line
under
fit-
your head like a towel or a very small pillow. You don't want anything too big. All right. Because remember, the curve in the shoulders is usually bigger than where the back of the head is. That's why we use a pillow at night. Okay. So I'm going to get there myself. And I'm going to get this here. And you can keep the camera off and or you can stay on. It's up to you because you'll get it from my directions. So as long as you can hear me. So I'm doing it if you want to take a look at me, just so you can get a sense. The head is on something small. Great. And from the pelvis, the legs are bent and the feet are flat on the floor. And this is just active rest. But we don't want to fall asleep, because if we fall asleep, then it goes into the subconscious. It's not bad to fall asleep, but you won't remember it consciously. So everybody take a second. Great. And we're going to start once again with what the little exercise we did with the top of the spine. So you're imagining now that you're not supporting the head. The spine is not upright. You're letting the spine and the head release into the floor or whatever you're laying on, the bed, whatever you're on. And remember that the head is releasing away from the top of the spine. Just like you did. And as we did with all those muscles, you're letting go. You're thinking all those muscles coming away from the top of the spine, coming away from it. Kind of like when you boil a chicken bone, the meat falls away from the bone. It's the same thing. You're letting them fall away from the bones of the spine. From the top all the way to the bottom where you can feel the sacral area. And some people like to use the image of melting or flattening. Remember, I don't care about the words. I care more about the idea that the spine is very, very passive. Then I want you to bring your attention to your shoulders. And I want you to think of the shoulder blades melting into the floor. And as they melt in the floor, I want you to think of the clavicles in the front as going way out to the side, the sides of the room. And then the arms just resting. You can have them anywhere. You can have them on you or on the surface that you're touching. The only thing is don't have them over your head. Keep them somewhere down towards the body. Then we go to the pelvis. And as we mentioned, the pelvis is widening, getting very, very, very wide. And the lower back sacral area is softening. And then where the leg is bent, the leg is releasing from the pelvis, letting go from the pelvis, and going up toward the knee, which is pointed toward the ceiling. And the lower leg is relaxing into the floor through the foot. And you do that with both legs, one leg and then the other. And then at whatever point you want, I want you to notice your breath, but try not to do anything with it. Just notice it. Notice what moves as you breathe in and out. Do not make anything happen. Do not try to take a big breath or a small breath. Just leave it totally alone. Totally alone. Beautiful. Now, we're going to start with very simple exercise. And all you have to do is just stay calm, easy through all the things we mentioned. And if you notice that something is activating in a way, try to see if you can let it go. If you notice your feet get tight, or your fingers, or your shoulder, just see if you can let it go. And the first thing I want you to do is think about your right arm. From where the shoulder is, way on the outside, all the way through the arm. And just notice what your right arm is touching, how it feels. Just notice it. And then I want you to think of your right arm as becoming light. Whatever that means to you, light. Some people like, fluffy. It's becoming lighter. Where it's placed, it's just magically becoming lighter. And it becomes so light that you feel it could fly up toward the ceiling. But you're just leaving it where it is. And when you are ready, I want you to literally let your fingertips move up toward the ceiling so that the right arm is bent at the elbow. And as you have done that, keep thinking it's very light, very, very light. And as you have that elbow on the floor and the arm is up, I just want you to wiggle it, but gently. Wiggle it maybe to the right, to the left. You can go slow, you can go fast, but just let it move. Feel the joints of the wrist. Let that move. And make sure you're breathing. Just make sure the breath is coming in while you're doing that. It doesn't matter if it's coming in or out, just that it's moving. And then when you feel ready, I want you to keep the feeling of lightness, and I want you to bring the arm all the way up so that the shoulder is on the floor, but the arm is going toward the ceiling. keep feeling that that right arm is light. The rest of the body is calm. And then I want you to move the right arm at the joints, the joint of the elbow, the joint at the wrist, in the shoulder. And now you can bring the arm wherever you want. You can bring it over the head. You can bring it down toward the side. You can bring it out to the side, wherever it feels good for you. Wherever it feels good, where your arm would like to go. And make sure you're still breathing. And then when you feel like you've gotten tired of that, slowly release the arm down, let the elbow go back to the floor, and then the lower arm go back to the floor. And then all I want you to do is compare the right arm to the left arm. So the one that we moved to the one that we did not move. And again, whatever words, whatever idea comes up for you, remember there's no right or wrong. There's just whatever your experience is. That's it. And then what I want you to do when you feel ready is notice the left arm. Feel what it feels like. And see if you can use a thought of lightness through the left arm. And if you can, and if the left arm feels like something's changing, once again, let the fingers go up toward the ceiling as the elbow is on the floor, and move that arm. You can move it at the wrist, the fingers. You can stir like you're making a circle in the ceiling. And when you feel like you've done enough of that, you can allow the left arm to go all the way up to the ceiling. And then you can dance the arm around wherever you want. So remember, don't make it go someplace it doesn't want to go. Just wherever it feels good. And again, you're breathing and allowing it to fulfill whatever desire the arm wants. And as always, when you feel you've done enough, just bring the arm back down. There's no contest. And the only thing is when you do bring the arm back down and it settles, see what now you notice between the left arm and the right arm that we didn't move this time. We moved it the last time. Keep the breathing moving. And when you feel like, oh yeah, I can tell something is different. And remember, you may not notice much of a difference because remember, some people, their arms are not an issue for them, but some people they do. So just kind of notice that. And then when you're ready, slowly, slowly let your legs fall over to one side or the other to roll on to either your left side or your right side, whichever side you would like to roll over to. And when you feel ready, as in yoga, you just slowly bring yourself upright to a sitting position. Great. And then you can sit comfortably whatever way you want when you get there. If you want to go back to the way you were sitting, or you want to stay on the floor, whatever you want to do is fine. There are no real rules. And then to just notice how you feel now. And remember, again, as I said earlier, there's no good or bad. Doesn't matter. Okay. It's all information. That's all it is. And then if you're ready and you would like to share something about that, let me know what it is that you would like to share. And remember, after the right arm to the left arm, what was your experience through that? What did you notice? And was it hard to do? Was it hard to keep breathing while your arm was moving? I mean, it could be a gazillion things. Doesn't really matter. But what did you notice? Anybody like to go with
It was
anything?
interesting to feel the difference between the right arm that had been activated and energized and the left arm before it began to move. There was a definite energetic difference.
And what would you say for you was the energy?
The right arm felt longer,
Longer.
more alive.
More alive and
longer,
longer.
more alive.
There you go. Now remember, that's her perceptual. Doesn't mean you're going to get longer and more alive. It means she got it. Okay. Some people are like, God damn it. I wanted that. But see, that's what our minds and bodies do. You know, it's like, and some people, they don't get much because remember, your arm could be in a very good place today. We don't know where your arm is at. All right. Anybody else? Anything different? Go ahead, Loretta.
So after we had moved the right arm, there was a perceptible lightness on the whole. I almost want to say into my chest and my torso.
It went all over.
Yeah, it felt like even though I hadn't had any awareness there, that also was lighter. And then obviously when we moved to the left one, that became more equal. What I did notice was that when you reminded us to breathe, when we were moving the full arm, my breathing got a lot more shallow. I mean, honestly, I was like, oh God, yes, okay, we've got to be breathing. And up until that point, I think I'd been breathing relatively, I mean, I didn't think that I wasn't breathing, but I obviously wasn't breathing to the same extent
that you had been. Yep.
Yeah, than I had been. So when you prompted, I was like, there was a noticeable, okay, I'm definitely not breathing. Because when you said initially feel where the breathing was happening in my abdomen was the one that was moving the most. And I had my hands sort of rested on my pelvis, where my abdomen and my legs meet. So I could feel my tummy moving. And when you said remember to breathe, I was like, okay, I can definitely feel that it's not moving. And I have a tightness in my right elbow. That I mean, I don't know if it's just my imagination, but it seems to feel better. It's not completely gone, but it's definitely a lot better than before we started.
Something shifted. Yes, absolutely. And she makes a really good point. Again, she worked on the arm, but she felt something going on through the rib cage chest. Remember, these are very connected. So you never know which one is good, what's going to happen. So that's excellent. That's excellent. Anybody have something different or something you would like to? Go ahead, Antoinette.
My right arm felt so light and my left arm so heavy. It was like so different. But my whole system started feeling really relaxed and light already, just doing the one arm, the right arm. Very relaxing for me.
Yeah. And by the way, remember, The right arm doesn't have the same abilities as the left in all people. Few people have the same ability in both arms. So you don't know what that will really be like. You have to observe it. You have to observe it and then get intimate with it so that you can go, oh, look at that. I now see that. And that will then change what happens with your arms as you go through life. So Norma, go ahead.
For me, the right arm was just so light, and I was almost drifting off to sleep. It felt so easy. And then when I was going with the left arm, which is the side that was affected by my stroke, I could feel in my shoulder a clicking, but it wasn't sore. It was actually a release. It felt like a huge release.
Oh, nice.
And the sensation of flowing out of this movement, flowing down through my shoulder, down my arm, and out of my fingers. And it's just like relieved even more pressure that and it feels much more, sorry, I can't always think of the right word. It feels more flexible.
Yeah,
yes.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And once again, once we ease up on the body, we just don't know what we're going to get. Remember, gripping for most people is a big one. That's a big one. And remember that gripping goes all the way up to this area. There are some people who are so gripped, this area is all concaved because they're so gripped from the fingers all the way through the arms and shoulders. So that's a very huge one. You see it as people get very, very old, there's a tendency for that to occur. And remember, it's not helping anything. It's not helping anything. They just feel as though it's necessary. They're holding. That's excellent. And I know even with this cancer, you know, when the rib sticks out, there's a tendency for me to want to grip this side, and it's not helping. It's not doing anything. And it feels so much better when I don't. Okay. So excellent. Excellent. Anybody? Oh, go ahead.
And what I also wanted to say is yesterday was 5 months ago that I had my stroke.
Okay.
And I was totally paralyzed down the left side, just for the people who don't know. And I'm going to put my left hand up now, and that's how high I can get it.
Wow.
And my fingers. So, and Gary, we started doing this 3 months ago.
Yes, Norm and I did a lesson privately.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So it's so it's such a relief, and I'm so grateful. I'm blown away by it. It's so simple and yet so effective.
Yes. And see, that's what I love. Simplicity, but effective. And remember, you can think with your mind, body, wherever you are, whenever you want to. You can check in, you can come in. It's not like you have to have a special program or you have to have a setup. You can just be sitting somewhere, staying somewhere, and all of a sudden check in with your arm and go, oh my God, I'm all lifted in the shoulder. Why am I doing that? You see? So that's what I love about the technique, because it doesn't hamper you. It doesn't make it like you have to have your bands, you have to have, you know, your machine or whatever the case may be. You just have to have you and your thinking. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Okay. I had 2 experiences. One, my right arm did feel longer and lighter. Did with everybody else, but I have an actual back injury. So when we were doing the leg actually felt worse, which was weird, my right leg. So I can feel the tingling hurt in my back and my hip and my knee. So I was either that is trying to hold on too much, or what am I doing? I'm not even sure.
Well, that's the interesting question. But it's giving you a sign, it's giving you a signal that those are the areas that you need to like look at and go, oh, wow, what is it doing? What is it doing? And did you noticed it with which arm? Do you remember?
Right arm. Yeah, it's right arm.
And you're
Yep, the
right-handed?
right arm. Yep.
Yep.
And all the right side of the body.
There you go. And the whole right side of the body, which is fabulous, Kristen, because you got a really big reaction. So there must be something going on where there's a kind of, when you use the right arm, there may be a holding, and I'm just saying maybe, there may be a holding going down the torso and in through the leg. Remember, many people, this is how sports, they'll be going for something with the arm and they'll grip every other muscle of the body. That is not helping them, but they're thinking it's helping. They're thinking it's helping, you see, and it's usually not. That's wonderful. That's wonderful, and thank you for sharing that, because again, even though we're working with the arm, it doesn't mean we're not going to feel something with the leg. It doesn't mean that. It might, but it might not. Beautiful. Anybody, anything else? Go ahead, Antoinette.
Gary, I have a question I asked you on a podcast once, but I need to hear the answer again. So
Okay.
this is very mind-based, and our brain is our whole system. So now Norma, I don't know, Norma can also help with this maybe, because you had a stroke, you had brain cancer. So what happens when you can't activate your brain or your mind, because that's where your problem is? I know you answered this before, but I can't exactly remember the answer.
Remember, the thinking always remains. The thinking always remains. So even though I didn't know who I was, where I was going, and what was going on, I knew that I was somebody going somewhere. The thought of having something was still there. So when it's bad, that means there's a bigger block, like mine was the brain cancer on the left. You have to attend more slowly, just like you would with a small child who can't walk. You have to attend, or they're learning to walk. You have to tend more slowly, more succinctly, more focus. But you're looking to access what is. So even with Norma's stroke, remember, things can still work in there. She just can't access them. So what she's doing, or what I was doing, is looking for a point of access. Like, I know something. I just don't know what it is that I know. And for me, the first thing that came was, oh, I had something in my right pocket that was going to help me. I just knew it was going to help me. And I pulled it out with my phone and I looked at it and said, what the hell is this? Because I really didn't recognize it. I was like, oh my God. And then I thought, no, the phone, this is going to help. I don't know how, but it will help. You see what I mean? And eventually the phone did help. But I had to go really slow, and I had to let the access kind of catch up and never get flustered or frustrated or freaked out, because that's really going to kick it right off, because it's too fragile. It's too vulnerable. And Norma, would you want to add anything to that?
Yes, Gary, I absolutely agree with you. And yeah, for me, it was very much when I had my stroke and I came around, I was very aware. I can still clearly see it even now in my mind's eye that I'd had a stroke. I knew that. And yet I didn't know. I tried to get myself up, and I couldn't. And then, but there was no panic.
Okay,
I had no panic,
good.
but I knew I needed help, and my son was at home, and I tried shouting for him, and then there was no voice coming out. But I
Mhm.
knew that somehow, if I just focused on it, I would eventually, he would hear me something, and he
Mhm.
did. So that gave me, it was also like felt like I was out of my body,
Got
watching
it.
my body,
Watching your body. Yep.
and knowing, well, only certain things I can move and do, and I do need assistance. So when I accepted that, and suddenly I managed to get my son's name out, and he came and realized what had happened, and then got me medical attention. And I remember snippets of all the procedures after that, of the
Okay.
incidents. And to me, I've been at peace with it, because I just realized that the snippets that I remember are the ones that I need to have remembered.
Yes, exactly.
So instead of getting all upset and, frustrated, because I did get upset the one day. I had a bit of a pity party and a shit show, and I thought,
Sure.
and then I knew that I just went right back. And then I had a good talk to myself and said, right, now you're going to focus on, you are getting through this, and I'm healing every moment, every second I'm healing.
Yes. And
So
and I want to add that the body always wants to go back into a healed, whole, balanced state. And the trouble is sometimes we don't allow it because we get too occupied with something else.
exactly.
Yeah, that's a
And
real, yeah.
And also I had people saying to me, oh no, you can't try and do that now, you've just
Yeah.
had a stroke. So I had to shut that out and say, I know what I'm capable of doing,
Yes,
and take control, so they
absolutely.
could understand that I'm in control of my healing, nobody else.
That's right. And really that's the only way someone will heal, because if they listen to the outer voice may be sending you in the wrong direction.
Mm,
Maybe they're sending you in the right direction, but maybe not. So
yes.
I'm always suspect. And, and I was through the same thing. And unfortunately, the hospitals can be really challenging because they
Mm,
have their agenda and their ideas of how it
that's
should be and how you should be, and that's
yeah,
not necessarily correct. Not correct.
exactly.
Yeah.
Norma,
Yes.
were they able to use any of the TPA, the clot busting medication on you in your stroke treatment at the hospital?
No, they gave me the clots busting medication in the ICU, and I started bleeding immediately through my gums.
Wow.
So the panic, the specialists were in a panic. They stopped it immediately, and then a week later they tried me on aspirin, and I was still bleeding, because they were taking blood from me every day. But I've said to them, I've never had clotting problems with clots. so I've always bled, you know, tended to bleed more
Right.
than most people. So I'm on no clotting medication at all.
Good.
And yeah, these they couldn't find a medical reason why I had the stroke.
Mhm.
The picture of my heart shows my heart is absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. They couldn't pick up where if they had, you know, any clots or anything else. But yeah, on the 24-hour EEG, because I started having seizures 2 days after the stroke. So they did a 24-hour EEG, and that showed I was having constant seizures, the petit mal and grand mal,
Wow.
and which I'd never had before. And it also showed that on the right side of my brain, it had there were some white spots, which they said is old trauma.
Okay.
So from a head injury that I had as a child, where I was hit by a swing.
Oh, yeah.
And
And that, yeah, so they seem to think that that's the somehow a clot developed there.
Okay.
And yeah, or the other, but they don't know. They also asked me if I'd had the shot,
Oh, the
and I said yes, and I said no, and then they asked me if I'd been in contact with people who had had it, and I said yes, and they said that it's a possibility that it could be shedding from that, because they've had a lot of cases where people who haven't had that shot and who haven't been sick, who have just had heart attacks and strokes, and they've found no reason why. They haven't been able to find a reason. So, yeah, at this stage, you know, well, those are the only two things that
they've
came
mentioned.
up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
So
I want to.
Idiopathic. They don't know what it, you know, what the cause is.
Yeah. So we want to stop here because we're running just a little over. What I want to say though about what we did, remember the awareness, as we mentioned, is all. The more intimate you keep becoming between the mind, body, spirit, the more powerful it becomes. Remember, it now knows that you're honoring it in a very different way, and you're taking care of it in a different way. And that's one of the greatest remedies to all of this. And that's what I've used through my cancer. That's really what did it, because you can become intimate with everything in your body, every organ, everything. And then you can transcend things in a very, very different way, because these organs can listen to what you feed them. But if you feed them like some people are fed all their lives, well, your mother had a bad heart, your aunt had a bad heart, and you're going to have a bad heart. Well, now that's the whole negative programming. So we have to just keep in mind that, oh, wow. And as you go through the week, when you find you're doing something, well, first of all, if you can do that exercise on your own, that would be great. Even just, you know, for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever feels good before you go to bed. And you can play with variations on it, but keeping the idea that how much can I connect and let go of through that place. And wherever you have pain, remember, that's a good signal that that's the place you want to give a little more attention to. You want to see what is that really about, because there is a story. And as Norma said, they found stuff from childhood. That is more than common with so many people. An accident that happened at 6 years old that all of a sudden shows up at 57, and you have no idea that that was even related. All right, so everybody got it? This was fantastic. I can't thank you all enough. Thank you so much for the contributions. We'll meet again next Wednesday at noon once again, and we will continue. And remember, like, these are the basics, but we can go, let's face it, we can go on forever. But we're gonna do these 3, okay? Excellent, excellent.
you.
So thank you.
Thank you,
Hi,
Gary.
hi, Hatumbra.
Bye.
Hi,
Bye.
great to see you.
Thank you.
Bye.
You're so welcome, and we will send you the
Gary.
information.
Thank you so
Yes.
much. Great to meet you all.
Great to
Thank you.
meet all of you. Yes.
And you too.
And if for some reason
My
somebody,
husband had a left side stroke, Norma, and is very fully recovered. So this was a year and a half ago. So sometime we'll talk.
Oh, wonderful. That would be
Wonderful. Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Very,
Thank you.
very, yeah, you're welcome. So happy to meet you all. Thank you, Gary.
And
all
you
right,
too.
thank
You
you.
Gary.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Holding you in
Bye.
great affirmative healing energy, Gary.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Okay.
Gary.
Thank
Bye-bye
you for
now.
healing us. Gary. Bye.
You're so welcome. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, Gary.
Bye-bye.
Bye.